Le poulet aux olives avait refroidi. Dunia, vexée, n'était pas venue. Ma mère était au bord du malaise. Sa tension était montée à 17/6. Quant au padre, il est sorti dans le jardin et s'est mis à déchiqueter nerveusement les herbes hautes qui bordaient l'allée. C'en était trop pour ma mère. À part quelques maladresses, elle ne comprenait pas ce qu'elle avait fait pour en arriver là. J'ai tout fait pour rendre mes enfants heureux. Son problème, c'est qu'elle aurait voulu naître dans une autre famille. Elle a toujours envié les autres. Elle aurait aimé être une Française. Voilà la vérité. My translation. The chicken and olives had gone cold. Dunya, angry, hadn't come. My mother was close to passing out. Her blood pressure had risen to 17/6. As for Dad, he went out into the garden and started tearing nervously at the tall weeds that bordered the path. It was too much for my mother. Apart from a few missteps, she didn't understand what she had done to reach this point. I did everything to make my children happy. Her problem is that she would have liked to be born into another family. She has always envied others. She would have liked to be French. There, that's the truth. Assalamu alaikum. Believe it or not, this is Amina, and this is a new podcast episode. I don't quite believe it myself, but let's see how it goes, inshallah. To be honest, it's been, I don't know, it's been like maybe, it's been over a year anyway, since I recorded an podcast episode. And I have wanted to record some in that time. I kept telling myself, I don't want to start it again unless I'm going to record regularly. So I kept not doing it. But this time I thought, let's just do it. Whatever. I think generally, not always, but often, if you want to do something that's useful and, beneficial, and you're questioning or holding yourself back for reasons like the one I just mentioned, the general rule I would say is do it. Yeah, because it's so easy to just keep finding reasons not to do things and then you never do anything. And that's how I felt at the beginning of this podcast. I mean, back in 2000 and whatever it was, when I started, I kept, finding reasons not to do it. And then I did it, and alhamdulillah, it was a good run. Yeah. Anyway, I actually initially intended to write a review of this book, as I have been doing with the books that I've been reading. But I just thought I'd do this instead. Quick warning that there may be probably going to be some minor spoilers. I'll try to avoid them, but I think some things may come out. And today's episode is about a French book, actually, but it has been translated into English, so it's accessible regardless. Un homme, ça ne pleure pas, by Faiza Guene, or in English it's called Men Don't Cry. It's been quite well received in English from what I can see, and at least two other books by Faiza Guene have been translated into English, so she's on a roll, mashallah. This particular book, what is it about? It follows mainly the youngest child and the only son in a family of French Algerians living in Nice, and the protagonist's name is Morad. He has two older sisters, and it starts when they're children and follows them through to adulthood, basically. I wouldn't really say it's plot driven as such, which is why I suppose spoilers are not a major issue. It's more about the character development and the context, I think, kind of getting insight into their particular social context and experiences. And to have that available in English, I think is quite a big deal actually, because the French Algerian experience, I can't think of another novel available in English that portrays it. And Algerians make up a huge percentage of the French population. When I say Algerians, I mean first, second, third generation. So, what else can I say about the book? The parents, I guess, their characters are pretty significant. The mother is sort of fully involved in their children's lives. And as we see in this book, the author and the characters would suggest overly involved in their lives. It is one of the themes that comes up, how her kind of need to control, especially her son's life, holds him back, kind of affects his confidence, and affects the decisions that he makes. The father is a very quiet figure in the book, but perhaps, I'm not going to say the main character, but in ways his presence is pretty consistently there. So I suppose it's a book in a way about the parents, even though it's told from the perspective of Murad, and the parents are not always in it, but their presence is always there. The style, the writing style, I think is quite striking in this book. It's funny, often sarcastic, and very casual. It's told in first person by Murad as the narrator, but the author's voice, I feel, comes through very clearly without getting in the way. And I saw a review on Goodreads actually that said that Faiza Guene was clearly enjoying herself when she wrote this book, and that is exactly how it feels. It feels like she's just having a ball. So that was a lot of fun. I did really appreciate that, actually enjoyed it. The characters, as I said, there's 3 siblings, and I think they kind of show the different routes that someone from their particular social background might choose. So you have the eldest sibling, sister, who pretty much does what she's kind of expected to do. I think she goes to university. I don't remember, to be honest. She's probably the least prominent character in this book. I can't even remember her name. But anyway, I can't remember if she goes to university, but she gets married, she has children. She marries an Algerian, like French Algerian, so it's kind of like the perfect, child of a French Algerian, I guess. Then the second sibling is Dunya, who's basically the opposite. She leaves home very early after clashing with her parents for several years. And she disappears from their life for quite a long time. That's not really a spoiler because it happens pretty early on in the book. And she chooses a way, because she leaves so dramatically, she basically burning her bridges. She can't come back to her family easily, even if she wants to. And then you have Murad, who is the youngest, and he's quite a sheepish character, but that's clearly intended. And again, I think it's in part to reflect the effects of the mother on his life. But he also says it about himself that he's kind of weak. So you have this kind of internal dialogue going on as well, which is quite interesting. For me, I think the relationship between the father and the son, and the father and the children in general, is perhaps one of the most powerful, or it was the most powerful, I think. And I found the father very familiar, maybe more so than the mother, in that he's like many of our fathers and uncles who love us deeply, but they don't show it in words, they show it in other ways that are not always easy to perceive or appreciate, I guess. So, yeah, that was very touching, I think. I won't say what I was going to say because that is a spoiler. Moving on. Another thing that is quite, always find it difficult to, emotionally difficult, is the issue around immigrant parents who see their children going off the track that they want for them, but particularly as relates to Islam and pride in themselves and their heritage, and that is touched upon in this book quite a lot. And you see this puzzled feeling from the parents who don't understand why their child is behaving this way, and they can't stop it. And I've just remembered actually that I have read another book about North Africans in France, and it was called, what's it called? I've forgotten. It's a very short title in French. It's by a Moroccan writer, and I've forgotten it completely. Let me look it up. It's hard when I don't remember the writer's name either. What was it called? OP. That's it, OP. It has been translated into English actually, but I can't remember what the English title is. It's completely different to the French one, which means in the country, in the old country maybe, or bled. What's the writer's name? OP. Wow, this is hard to find. Oh, it is Darwin Jalon, is it? Dries Schreiber? لا لا لا. أي أوبي طاهر بن جنون, yes, Opi. A Palace in the Old Village, that's what it's called in English. And it's basically about a father who lives in France, an immigrated from Morocco. And after he retires, he wants to go back to Morocco, build a house there for his family, and that's been like his dream and what he's been working towards. But by the time he retires, his children are not interested in going to Morocco. They have their lives in France. And I found that split heartbreaking, to be honest. I guess it feels really personal. Not that I have exactly the same situation, but I see it in a lot of people that I know, and just the general Algerian immigrant communities, I suppose. For Algerians, I think it's quite common for them to want to go back when they retire, and it's also common that their children will not want to go back. Anyway, so that book touches on the same kind of topic, which is this disconnect or just different priorities of the parents and the children, and the kind of feeling of helplessness in the parents who just don't know where they went wrong and don't know what to do next. And that's definitely not exclusive to Algerian immigrant families, of course. Another thing I liked about it was Morad, after he graduates, he becomes a school teacher in a secondary school in Paris. And I quite enjoyed the insight into that life of being a teacher in a secondary school, in many ways familiar, like a British school, the staff room and talking about the students. letting off steam and all that kind of thing. This is actually, I mean, there was quite a lot of him with the other teachers, but I was quite interested actually in seeing a bit more of how he would deal with the problem student who everyone's kind of doesn't want in their class, Mehdi Mazwani, but who he feels, I guess, I wouldn't say he feels like he has, that they come from the same background, because he actually says at one point, when reflecting on Mehdi, how fortunate he was to grow up by the sea. That's what he said. But you can understand what he means by that. Is I guess a more wholesome life than growing up in Paris, and gave him more of a chance in life, I guess. But then I don't know, he does still, I suppose, feel like he has a certain level of connection with him, because they're both North African heritage, and they have certain things in common. He does try to connect with him, but then it kind of peters out. It's not a main thread in the story. And I guess if it's going to be realistic, a lot of the time, like, one teacher can't really change the life of a student like that. Someone who's got, a difficult family life, maybe, and he's already 16 or so. It's one of those romantic kind of, like, you wish you could help all these children, but the reality is that often teachers are just too stressed and overworked, and just, it's kind of not there. They can only have so much effect on a student. So yeah, the reality is that often they can't make a huge difference. So yeah, I mean, I'm not. I guess while I would want it to be a happy ending for him, it wouldn't be realistic, I guess. So yeah, obviously, I think one of my main reasons for reading this book and expectations of it were the Algerian references. I think, no, of course, it's not the first book I've read about Algerians outside France, because I read the trilogy by Zahir Rahmani and did an episode about it. But this is a novel, so I guess it's, let's just say, one of the first. So I was kind of looking forward to seeing familiar scenes in the book, familiar references. The first thing I'd say about that is, considering the French socio-political scene and literary scene, this book is really important, I think, for French Algerians to see their reality, and the psycho-emotional, I don't know if that's a word, struggles they go through, and of course socioeconomic, portrayed in a novel. I think that's really significant. I'm not that familiar with modern, contemporary French literature, but I don't think it's that common to find that in a novel, even now. However, for my own experience reading the book, because I'm not French Algerian, I can't really pretend that this book reflected my reality or my experiences, although there were moments that were familiar, probably more when they're in Algeria, or they were familiar to me, if I considered those moments as being in Algeria. I don't know if that makes any sense, but it makes sense in my head. So it wasn't like my reality, but I did recognise it as a reality of French Algerians I know very much. But But this did make me think, actually, the fact that even this book, which is by someone of Algerian heritage, about Algerian characters of Algerian heritage living in Europe, even with all those kind of commonalities with me, and also kind of a sympathetic view of religion and of Algeria and of Algerian culture, even with all those commonalities, I didn't really see myself in it. So what it made me think about was that this kind of representation issue can only go so far, especially when we're focused so closely on the socio-cultural identity markers that are very commonly discussed today, like race, nationality, all the other stuff. Because if that's the case, basically the only way that I would be able to see myself in a book is if it was about someone of Algerian heritage with a British like background as well, grew up speaking English, not very good at Arabic when they're younger, blah blah blah. Like, it has to be me, basically. It has to be me. But that's not the case. Like, I can see myself in many books. And it's impossible and quite ridiculous to think that I have to have a book that portrays exactly my reality before I can be satisfied. That's what it made me think. It also made me think about the book that I read just before this one, Finding Mr. Perfectly Fine, which I didn't really enjoy that much. I wrote a review of it, it's on the website. I didn't enjoy it that much, but as I was reading this one, I was thinking, if I took the story of Finding Mr. Perfectly Fine and I changed all the characters to having this background instead, would I have enjoyed it more? So is it just like because they weren't from my background and I couldn't recognise the references? I think a tiny bit of it was that I would have enjoyed it slightly more if I'd recognised the references. But I'm not saying it's a bad book. Don't want to give the wrong impression. You can read the review, not getting into that. Final thought was, Murad, as I said, the tone of the book is one that is very much respectful of the Muslim heritage and the Muslim identity of the characters. And there are certain references like going to the mosque and trying to think of something else. Wearing jilaba, I think. I think there's a couple of other things in Algeria, when they go to Algeria. But Murad still does like lame stuff. Like when he goes to Paris, especially going to bars and stuff like that. He doesn't drink, and his kind of inexperience with women is slightly portrayed as a kind of a shyness thing as opposed to a choice that was made. So I guess for him, maybe that is the case. But anyway, despite all of that, I still felt like the tone of the book was inclined towards a respect for Islam and Islamic practice. And it does come up, especially towards the end. I'll say no more about that. So yeah, I think this actually book is a really good one for people who are not familiar with Algerians in France and they want to get an idea of, just get some insight into their lives and how they perceive themselves in French society, as well as just how they see themselves in their Algerian culture as well. I think it's really good. I think from that angle, and that's all I have to say. I think. I don't know if I sound like I enjoyed it, and I actually don't really know how I felt. I definitely found it funny. I really liked the tone, the style. I thought it was clever in its simplicity and casualness. And it's a valuable book for the reasons I've mentioned. And touching in places, yeah. Okay. Thanks for listening. I didn't plan this that well. I just thought I'd come on here casual, like, to match the book, although obviously she planned the book. I would definitely consider reading another one of her books, inshallah, maybe Discrétion. I think that's what it's called in French. La Discrétion, yeah. But not soon, because I have way too many other books I want to read. But inshallah, one day. Yeah. Thanks for listening. Wassalamu alaikum.